Look, you know how excited we get within Sky and all the media before the start of the season. You know what it means for the fans. What about the chief executive of the Premier League? Do you still get a buzz?
Equally excited, absolutely. It's my 20th season at the Premier League, actually. Excited as ever to see how it goes. And we start on Friday night, an emotional night at Anfield, and then we're off. And by next May, we'll know the answer to the question. It's very hard to predict what's going to happen. Clubs are investing on the pitch. We've got a new stadium around the corner, the Hill Dickinson. We've got all sorts of stories and narratives to follow. And if it's anything like last season, it's really hard to predict. Lots of drama, lots of unpredictability.
Talk to us about the challenges as you see it then, because I think post-Jurgen Klopp, Liverpool surprised a few people last season by winning the title. Since then, Manchester City have strengthened, Chelsea have strengthened, Arsenal have strengthened. How do you see the challenges? How many realistic challenges are there for the title?
Well, I think I'm going to quote Mikel Arteta, because I think he's a better judge than I am, and he said that there are 6, 7 or 8 Premier League sides now who've got the ingredients to mount a title challenge. And let's face it, if he's even half right, we're going to have a fantastic season ahead of us. Of course, it's not all about the title. You've got the battle for Europe, potentially, who knows, 8 or 9 spots available again, and the relegation battle at the bottom, which is obviously important. We want competition throughout the Premier League, and I hope we get it.
The fact that Manchester United finished 15th and Spurs 17th, and Spurs went on to win a European trophy despite that season, what does that say about the strength and depth in the Premier League?
Well, I don't know what that specifically says, but it's demonstrable to me now that there is enormous strength and depth within the Premier League, and an intensity of competition that hasn't been there for some time. If you just look at the roster of clubs that are playing in Europe, we've got 9 clubs playing in Europe. You've got Aston Villa qualifying for Europe for the 3rd time in a row. You've got Newcastle back in the Champions League. You've got Forest back in Europe for the first time in a long time. And so it shows the competitiveness within the league. So if you have that competition from top to bottom, you're going to keep fans enthralled. And when we all kick off on Friday night live on Sky Sports, we'll keep everyone entertained until May.
We're here in Liverpool, home of the champions, and I think it's surprised a few people just how much they've invested. You know, it felt almost as though the other clubs had to chase them because they are the reigning champions, and yet £240 million spent on transfers so far, still trying to get Mark Gay for another 40, still trying to get Alexander Isak for potentially 110 plus at Newcastle. Now, we don't know those transfers are going to happen, of course, they're players elsewhere, but what does the fact that the champions feel they need to spend that to stay ahead say to you?
Well, it's happened before, strengthening from a position of strength. Of course, they've also sold as well. So I think Liverpool's net spend is circa 100 million at the moment, and they're not alone in trying to strengthen their squads. So I think it says a lot about the position the club is in at this particular point, that it's able to do that. But they will have challenges, no doubt about it.
Of course, we're in Liverpool, and I need to ask you about Diogo Jota, because I think that tragedy hit so many people in football, but more so than anybody, the people in this city. How do the Premier League plan to sort of pay tribute to Jota over the coming weeks, and maybe in the initial match round? What are your thoughts?
As you say, it's a terrible tragedy, and I think anyone that watched Diogo play football could appreciate that he was a brilliant footballer. Perhaps what few people knew was how loved and respected and revered he was at the club, inside the club, and of course everyone who knew him, really. He was a special human being as well as a brilliant footballer. So I think it's right that we pay tribute to him this weekend. There'll be special tributes at obviously Anfield and at Molineux, where he obviously played for Wolves, and every club will pay its own tribute. There'll be a moment's silence, and all players wear black armbands to commemorate his life and his contribution.
Thank you for that. Right, I want to ask you about the Manchester City charges, which I asked you about this time last year as well. Are we any clearer yet on the timescale for that and when we might get a resolution?
I can't talk about it. Our rules to help, our rules are very specific. They say we can talk about things as the charges are made, and not until a decision has been published. And of course, we still await that decision, and I can't talk about the timing or speculate when that may be.
Can I ask you to explain that to the fans a little bit more? Because clearly the fans and everybody in football thinks this is a huge issue, and it's kind of hanging over football at the moment, hanging over the Premier League. Why is it that the Premier League can't hurry this along or make this happen quicker, and you can't answer the questions almost?
I can't answer that specific question. What I can tell you about is the system and how it works. I mean, it's an independent judiciary, essentially. So once the allegations and charge have been put forward, they go before an independent panel, which is independently selected, and they are then in charge of the process and its timings. They hear the case, they decide the outcome, and we have no influence over that, over it or its timing. And that's right, if you think, from an independence point of view, that there is independent people making those decisions, and we just have to be wait.
Is it a frustration for you that it's taking time, though? I mean, look, I've looked into this, I've spoken to some legal experts, and quasi-judicial processes like this, involving King's Counsel very often, it takes a long time, typically over 12 months, and that's what we're talking about here if it happens in the middle of September. But it is a frustration for you and the game.
Well, my frustration is irrelevant, really. I mean, I just have to wait, and legal processes rarely take less time than you anticipated, but we have to be patient.
Okay. La Liga has announced it's going to stage this game between Villarreal and Barcelona in Miami, which of course has raised in a lot of supporters' minds the prospect of the 39th game again, and whether it might prompt the Premier League to say, okay, we want to put one of our match rounds away from England and try and enter new markets. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the match that's being talked about, there's a long road to go yet about whether that will actually happen. It hasn't changed our view about matches abroad. We did look at the 39th game way back when, with lots of controversy. I recall that very clearly. And our objective at the time, when thinking about it, was to help grow the Premier League around the world. And we've been able to do that through different means, through brilliant broadcast partnerships, through digital technology, investing in other areas, like the Summer Series tournament we just had in the US. And now the Premier League is a genuinely global league. There are billions of people who will be tuning in over the course of the next 9 months to watch the Premier League action. So we've achieved that objective by different means, and that necessity has dissipated.
For the second consecutive season, the three teams that were promoted have been relegated back down to the Championship. How big a concern is that for you?
Well, I have to look at this over the long term. Since the Premier League began, about 40% of clubs, when they're promoted, stay in the Premier League for about 3 seasons. That data hasn't really changed over the last decade. It is the second season in a row. We should put that into some context. Only the third time since the Premier League began we've had 3 up and 3 down. And the season before that, in 22-23, we had all 3 staying up, and they were Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth and Fulham. And all 3 of those are performing extremely well in the Premier League 3 years later. So it is possible to come up, as you know, with or without parachute payments. You have Brentford and Brighton who've come up without parachutes and have made a very successful go of staying in the Premier League. So it's never going to be easy. That is for sure. The Premier League is becoming more competitive. The Championship is a fantastic division. We want it to be successful. We want there to be an influx of different clubs coming in and out. So it's something we need to keep an eye on.
Last one, Richard, from me. The independent football regulator is now law, and you and I have discussed that a lot over recent years as well. It will begin work, quote, later this year. I think the timescale's still far from clear. Are you any clearer about when it might happen, and how do you think it's going to work, the new system, especially with regards to the Premier League?
Yeah, the sort of parliamentary process is now finished. The bill has become law. So we're expecting the regulators to start operating in October or November this year. Obviously, we're not in control of the timeframes of that. We're the first country, major football nation, to be regulated in this way. The Premier League operates in a global environment. So naturally, we have some concerns, but the main thing is that I think the regulator doesn't start from a position that football is somehow broken in this country. I don't think it is. All of the key indicators are really positive for the whole of the pyramid, for the England teams, men's and women's. So I think there's lots to be really proud about. And the regulator should really be intervening where absolutely necessary. And those are the things that we're going to be looking for and try to build a really constructive relationship with the new regulator.
What sort of areas are you talking about? Which areas would you like to see them focus on? Is it financial regulation and the impact of clubs in their community?
Well, the areas that they focus on are dictated by the bill, and that will be the financial sustainability of the pyramid and clubs, heritage issues, ownership, those sorts of issues. So the focus is not what I would like it to do. It's the focus is written down by law. We need to interact with that regulator to ensure that, as is promised, really, that the progress of English football and the Premier League is not impacted by regulation. It is assisted, not deterred.